Today I'd like to tell you about a recent Nightscape adventure I had at a location I'd not visited for a few years. And as always, I appreciate you tuning in, and I hope you enjoyed this video as much as I enjoyed bringing it to you. So for the first couple of months of 2022, I've been out a fair bit shooting the night sky and landscape. And that's great because it's probably my least busy time of the year. I don't run any nightscape photography workshops through the summer here in Australia. And of course, we've got Christmas and New Year, so it's already pretty busy for family stuff and the like. But one of the things I always look forward to in the early months of the year is the return of the Milky Way galactic core to our early morning skies. Now, you would have seen my video last week where I ventured out for my first Milky Way shoot for the year. Well, this video is about my second adventure. I always rack my brain thinking of locations to shoot, and on this occasion I remembered an old stone ruin which I hadn't actually visited for, well, a few years. It's close to a lake and has a great uninterrupted view of the eastern horizon. So I packed my bags and set my alarm for 2 a.m. This should give me plenty of time to get out to the location and do the shots I had in mind. Now, as you'll know, I've been doing quite a lot of tracked shots recently, and I thought I'd also incorporate that into this particular trip. I was pretty keen to shoot with my longer focal length lenses, and I had both the 35mm and the 50mm lenses in the bag. And of course, I never go anywhere without the 20mm as well. One of my goals for this trip was to shoot a pretty wide panorama, including the old ruin as a foreground and as well as a beautiful sky above. And I reckon that 35mm may be the best focal length for this one. But as I checked the weather apps before I was, planning the trip, and I was actually a little bit dismayed to see that there was a chance of cloud cover as the night progressed. The only saving grace was that the majority of the cloud was supposed to be high-level cloud, and sometimes this can really add to a nightscape image. So anyway, I set off planning for the worst but hoping for the best. As I drove to the shooting location, I had to negotiate the typical kangaroo herds that always inhabit the night here in Australia. I even gave one a low-speed nudge, but no damage done to either of us. Anyway, as I arrived at the location and looked at the sky, it was just as clear as a bell, and that's what I was looking for, just what the forecast had predicted. So all was good. I made my way along the shore of the lake, and sure enough, out of the darkness, the outline of the ruin soon came into view. This is a stunning place to visit, and I think even more so in the dark of night. Now, some may think it's a little spooky, and well, perhaps it is, especially with the wind blowing through the open doors and the exposed beams. But once you get used to that, you really start to breathe in just how magnificent these scenes are. The stars were shining brilliantly, and the Milky Way core was in the perfect place for my intended compositions. You know, I spend a lot of time planning and working out my techniques and equipment for these shoots out in the field, but I have to say that when I get out there, my creative juices just take over completely. Now, this is something I've mentioned at length in my videos. Once we get a handle on the technical aspects of shooting nightscape photography, we can go all out and put all of our energy towards creating our images. Sometimes, look, I even talk to myself while I'm out there, marveling at the amazing sight before me. And I suppose I'm encouraging myself out there to do my very best work, especially with things like light painting. Yeah, look, I know I'm probably a bit loopy, but that's what it takes, I reckon, to do this nightscape stuff. Anyway, my first composition was a single image of the foreground ruin. I was using my 50mm lens for this, and I had in mind to do a tracked background shot of the core while it was still pretty low down in the sky. As you probably know, I hardly ever do single exposure foregrounds these days. But you know, the approaching bad weather was always in the back of my mind, so I was in time-saving mode. Anyway, this first image is one of my all-time favorites, and I hope you like it. Now you can see from this image that there were indeed clouds approaching, so I had to really move fast now. My next shot was going to be a multi-row panorama, and this was going to feature a multi-row tracked sky shot to incorporate into the scene. I don't often take these tracked panoramas due to, I guess, the time it takes to capture them. But look, I was on a roll and decided to press on and just see how it would turn out. I was able to capture the foreground shots without any drama at all using my 35mm Nikon lens. But the wind was picking up and I could see the clouds thickening up on the horizon. It was certainly a race against time. When I'd finished capturing the foreground, I moved position down to the edge of the lake. I wanted to get a clean view of the sky as I set up my tracker. And I usually do this as it certainly makes the blending process a lot easier later on in the editing. So, as I was working through the setup of the tracker, I could see the high-level clouds rolling in, and I knew it was going to be a struggle to get clean images of the Milky Way, but I pressed on regardless. Now, I used my Astro-modified Z6 Nikon for this series of shots. It seemed like forever shooting the images on the tracker. I lowered my shutter speed to 60 seconds just to speed up this process a bit compared to the usual 2-minute exposures that I often use. And even so, I knew I'd have to contend with heaps of clouds with the final composition. I was actually pondering whether I'd made the right decision to do so much tracking for this shot. In fact, I'd almost talked myself into the fact that it was a waste of time to continue. But I did continue, and I'm really glad that I did. My final stitched and blend pano was nothing like I intended, but I absolutely love it. Let me know what you reckon. So, by this stage, I was not only battling clouds, but also the glow of the approaching sunrise on the horizon. But I decided to do another panorama. No, not with the tracker this time. In fact, I quickly brought out my trusty 20mm lens on the Z6 II and set about shooting as many frames as I could to capture it was a haunting and I guess a beautiful scene unfolding before me. This also ended up being a multi-row panorama with my non-modified camera and look, pretty standard settings. Sometimes your basic photography instincts just kick in when you're in a rush, and especially so when the light levels are changing so rapidly. You find yourself hoping like crazy that the stitching software will be able to cope with the final collection of images. Well, I'm pleased to say that I didn't have to worry at all. My final shot is one that I'll treasure for a very long time. So there you go, quite a mixed bag really. I never intended to shoot that pre-dawn panorama at all, but sometimes you just have to go with the flow and hope for the best. I'm really pleased with my trip out to the old ruin, and I'm excited to get more shots like this moving forward this year. As I mentioned, I'll be ramping up my workshops this coming month, so I'm not too sure when I'll be able to shoot my next video, but whenever that is, I'll be sure to bring you guys along for the ride. So all the very best to all of you. I hope you can get out to see our glorious night sky really soon, and I wish you clear skies and an absolutely fantastic week. I'll see you later.